from the University of New Haven, and we're going to be starting our webinar on sports employment, or on criminal justice employment here momentarily. First off, we'll have Dr. Wes Yance speaking about the criminal justice industry at length. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section below, and right now I'll turn it over to Wes.
Thanks, Phil, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I just want to give you a brief overview of some of the career paths and employment opportunities that are available in the field of criminal justice. The field incorporates a wide variety of professionals and occupations, and we can break that down into several segments, starting with law enforcement and security, moving to the courts and legal services area, then moving into probation and parole and corrections. And we see that there's growth in employment in all of those segments of the industry, as well as some of the ancillary segments, the support services areas that are tangential to criminal justice as we normally think about it, things like security and information technology. Just to give you a little bit of an overview, we typically see in the master's degree program students in one of three career tracks. First are those that are currently in the middle of their career in criminal justice and related occupations. These are folks who have been working for 3 to 5 years, maybe more, as a correctional officer, law enforcement officer, security officer, a probation and parole officer, and they're looking to move up in that career. And because of the competitive landscape these days, advanced degree, a graduate degree in a related area is one more thing you can do to enhance your prospects for advancement. A second type of career track that we find students in who can benefit from a graduate degree in criminal justice is those who are currently in a different field, not in a criminal justice occupation, but want to get into that career track. And so, for instance, we've had students who are teachers' aides, who worked in mental health services, who worked in social services, who wanted to move into a more direct protective services or criminal justice role. So they were a teacher's aide and want to become a correctional officer, or they were a social worker and they decide they want to work specifically with juvenile offenders. And for these folks, they already have a decent amount of education. Often they will have either a bachelor's or master's degree in some other field, but they want to transition, and a master's degree in criminal justice will help them to do that. The third group that we tend to see benefiting from a master's degree in criminal justice are those who've just completed a bachelor's degree, often in the area of criminal justice, who had high hopes for the job market when they left and found that it was much more competitive than they had expected, and aren't able to get the type of position that they would like, and an advanced degree in criminal justice provides them with that extra opportunity, that extra credential and training to demonstrate that they can in fact perform at the level expected and make them more competitive in the job market. One of the things that you should know about the industry, so to speak, of criminal justice and the job market is that we've seen a marked shift in emphasis in employment. In the 1980s and 90s, we saw a lot of growth in the prison industry, a lot of growth in the prison population. A lot of that was due to increased law enforcement presence and enforcement of laws, increased sentencing and use of sentencing guidelines, for instance, 3 strikes laws, the pressure to prosecute and sentence folks to incarceration for drug offenses showed a huge increase in the prison population. That meant that the growth in the industry from an employment perspective was focused mainly on this first line occupations, the law enforcement officer, the police officers, the corrections officers within the prisons and jails, the probation and parole officers who work directly with offenders and their case managers. Those positions require and brought in a requirement of often at least a GED or high school diploma, but often a bachelor's degree or some college, and folks in those areas were often encouraged to increase their education to the level of a bachelor's degree. What we've seen in the last decade, decade and a half, and what we see happening moving much more into the future, and the projections are pretty clear, is an emphasis on community-based, problem-based, and population-based criminal justice services. So, for instance, we've seen a huge increase in specialized courts that deal with specific offender types. Drug courts, sexual offender courts, domestic violence courts are growing in number and their diffusion across the United States. Another type is the population-based courts, such as veterans courts, with the increased number of war vets coming back to the U.S., experiencing PTSD and other problems of adjustment as they return to the United States. We see that they are in need of greater services and also in greater support because they do experience obviously not universally, but in greater numbers than we've been able to anticipate. Problems with adjustment, including increased drug use, substance abuse of all types, and unfortunately types of crime. And so what we've seen across the country are a growth of what we call veterans courts, which deal specifically with veterans who have committed crimes, typically low-level felonies, non-violent offenses, although some of the courts have dealt with violent offenders. And so we've seen those types of courts become more and more common. Finally, the idea of community-based courts have grown in prevalence in the United States during this time period. And the community-based courts really focus on providing a combination of public protection and justice with social services, the services needed by the offender and the victims in victim crimes that will help to move everyone towards a more positive, progressive future. What this all means in terms of employment and job prospects is that we see, and we can see this in the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports, and what they do is they provide summaries of past employment, areas of growth, and then project out for the next decade where are going to be areas of growth. And what we're going to see in the next 10 years at least, probably well into the future, is a growth of those support services roles, folks who can work in a community court or a community-oriented police department. And what those do is they're not just, for instance, a law enforcement officer in a community policing organization is not going to be just handcuffing people, writing citations, bringing them to jail, the typical role that most Americans think that the police play. Their emphasis is much more on community service and community outreach, education, building relationships with members of the community, the people they serve. Many of the officers that I've worked with in my classes that I've taught have talked about this, the increased emphasis on being a customer service-oriented police officer. The same goes for corrections, the same goes for the courts. So in all areas of criminal justice, we see this very, very dramatic shift towards a more community-based, social service-based, community or customer service-oriented type of criminal justice. That's a good thing for those of you who are pursuing higher education, because what it means is an increased emphasis on the need for communication and critical thinking skills, skills working with diverse populations, and in fact what we call professionalization of those fields. And as those fields require more and more professional training, professional credentials, we see a need and a value added to professional degrees and advanced graduate degrees. So for those of you who are wondering, what can a master's degree in criminal justice do for me? Well, regardless of which of the three student tracks you fall in, whether you're a brand new student, just finished your bachelor's degree and want to get a good solid job in criminal justice, or you're in your mid-career and you want to advance to the level of a supervisor in your organization, or whether you are currently in another career and want to switch over to criminal justice, but you don't want to necessarily start from scratch, the master's degree is going to provide you with that level of training and education to help you work with community members from diverse backgrounds, not just the public, but also other members of other organizations and agencies that are outside of criminal justice, such as the county offices, the mayor's office, for instance, in a local area. And just to give you a little bit of kind of proof to the sentiment that this is a growing area and that the need for education and advanced degrees is growing in criminal justice, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports, we see that almost all of the growth, and there is projected substantial projected growth within criminal justice occupations, almost all of that is at the local and state level. In fact, at almost all of the federal types of employment within criminal justice, we see projected declines. And what that marks is really a shift from hardcore enforcement to more of this community-based, problem-based, social services types of criminal justice. And again, whenever we see this in any industry, we see an increased need for advanced degrees and advanced education. So I think that's really the lay of the land these days, that if you want to get in, you want to move up, you want to switch over, an advanced degree in criminal justice is going to be a great advantage to you. I think that's enough time of me talking. I would like to open up and answer any questions that you guys might have about the industry, about how a degree might help you, a master's degree in criminal justice might help you, and specifically how the master's degree program at the University of New Haven might be the right one for you. So I'll open it up to any questions.
I have one question about the salaries that they expect in the master's program at the conclusion.
So we have a question about expectations for salary, and it's hard to pinpoint a range. I could give you a range, but it's for it to be anywhere close to accurate, it's going to be very imprecise because it depends on the specific location, jurisdiction you're in. We see salaries, for instance, in corrections ranging from about $28,000 a year on the low end all the way up to about $80,000 to $90,000 on the high end, depending on the correctional facility, the size of the facility, the level of security, if it's maximum versus minimum, the credentials they require of their officers, the training they require. So you're going to get higher pay for jobs that require or prefer those with master's degrees. Those are going to pay higher. Bureau of Labor Statistics has pretty clear evidence that advanced degrees yield advanced earnings, and so it does pay off. The median range, or say the middle range of salaries in most of these occupations, is somewhere between about $40,000 and $70,000 per year, and that does vary a lot, again, by the location, the level and rank that you're at, the organization you work for, and so there's pretty good variation. But to give you an idea, you're looking at a salary between $40,000 and $70,000, and the more education you have, the higher the salary you're going to have.
Dr. Johns, we also have another question involving what do you see as the growing trends for the criminal justice industry moving forward?
So in terms of growth trends, I think the real key is in that human and social services component. I think within every single occupation within criminal justice, whether it be law enforcement officers, corrections officers, probation and parole, court services, every single one of these jobs essentially is going to require more human services skills, more knowledge of the available social services, and especially the ability to communicate and work with people from diverse backgrounds. I think that's one of the things that we see across the board for every job, every occupation. Folks who embrace that and build skills in those areas and demonstrate those skills are going to be on the fast track quite honestly, to move up in these organizations. Folks who stick to a more traditional form of criminal justice ideology that focus more on strict enforcement and less on the social services, quite honestly, are going to find more roadblocks along their way to advancement. So I think the big trend is across the board, regardless of occupation, focusing more on the social and human services side of your job. That's, again, why we see an increase in professionalization. More and more folks have advanced degrees and advanced training. The other area that I did see some growth in terms of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is probably not of any surprise to those of you, but that's in the computer investigations, computer and financial services sector. One of the things that we've seen over the past decade is the increase in computer-based crimes. And so folks who have skills related to the investigation and prosecution or prevention of computer-related crimes, we see a growth there. In fact, somewhere the order of about 40% projected growth over the next 10 years in that particular area. And it's one of the highest growth areas within criminal justice. So in terms of just targeting a particular type of criminal justice, anything related to computer crimes is going to be an area of employment opportunities. But that's also not the biggest area of employment within the industry. Clearly the biggest areas are in government focused jobs. Basically your state and local law enforcement, probation, parole, corrections, and court services agencies are the ones that are going to be hiring and continuing hiring the most people. Their growth is projected to be pretty steady relative to other industries, somewhere between about 6 and 20%, depending on the particular job and location.
The next question we have is from Carrie Ann. She was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the forensic computer investigation job.
Hi, Carrie Ann. Yeah, we've seen a real interest in this area, and one of the reasons I know about this is because we offer, as part of the master's degree program here at UNH, a certification in computer forensics. And there's a lot more to it than just understanding how people can use computers to commit crimes. We include 2 specific computer-based courses in that certificate part of our program. One on computer crime investigation, focuses on all types of computer crimes, try to run the gamut from computer-based sex crimes all the way to fraud and financial crimes. The second course is focused much more in depth on the vulnerabilities and protections that organizations need to provide and need to be aware of when dealing with network connections, basically internet-based crimes. We're talking about a lot of security issues here. For instance, how do companies maintain the security of their customer database? And we've all known someone, if not our own, not ourselves, who have been the victims of credit card theft, or unauthorized use of credit cards, debit cards, checking accounts, or even worse, complete identity theft. A lot of this happens through compromised databases, and so companies that want to survive in this competitive world need to provide security to their customers. And so what I think we're seeing is an increase in the number of security professionals that know how to provide companies with specific plans to protect their data and to keep on top of it. And that's one of the things that you need to understand about that area in particular is everyone knows that the laptop they bought 6 months ago is now outdated. Well, so are the techniques that people use to protect the data stored on their networks. And so you have to constantly keep up with the training and the current trends. In order to keep up, you have to start out. And so what we provide is a base training in the techniques for investigating computer crimes and understanding of the different types of computer crime, and then focusing in on that network vulnerability and protections. At that point, you make yourself marketable to employers looking for someone who has knowledge of computer crimes, but that is not enough to stay abreast. You'll need, and they will companies will often pay for in-service training throughout your career to keep you on top of your game. I think that's an area of great growth, but it's also an area where you will have to continually train. I think we provide a good foundation for that as part of our program.
Is there any other questions that you guys would like to ask? Well, if there are no further questions, I think at this point we'll probably conclude. And if you do have any other follow-up questions, feel free to post them in this forum or email us. Dr. Yance, would you be willing to give your email address?
Sure, and let me also just mention briefly, since no one asked, but I imagine there are a few people out there that are wondering about this move towards a social and human services orientation and how our program relates to that. Whereas the computer forensics certification focuses more on that particular segment of the industry, we also offer, as part of the degree program, a criminal justice management certificate that all students should earn if they follow the curriculum. And that provides the leadership and management orientations to work within any of the areas of criminal justice, including planning and forecasting. The other is many students who are not interested in that computer forensics area. If you care about computer crime, you don't want to work in computer crime, you want to work more in social services. We also offer, as part of the degree program, the Victim Services and Advocacy certification. That certificate is more in line with that social and human services orientation, and will provide students with a really well-rounded foundation for moving into any of these segments of the industry where the human touch is necessary. So I just want to point that out there, put that out there, so that those of you who are not interested in computer forensics know that there's a lot to be offered by this degree program. In terms of contact, yes, I'll give you my email address, wyonts@newhaven.edu. That's wyonts@newhaven.edu. You can also reach us through our website, and if you're interested in finding out more information about the program, contacting us to ask questions, to talk with one of our admissions representatives, you can reach us through our website at cjonline.newhaven.edu. Either of those methods will get you in touch with us, and we can send you more information, answer any questions you have, talk about the industry more and what this degree can do for you.
We would like to thank all of you guys for attending, and like we said, if there are any different, if you have any new questions or anything, post them on the forum, email us, whatever you'd like. We hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.